For the last 7 days, I carried the Glock 43x, and we're going to test the comfort, concealability, and effectiveness of this handgun. At the end of this episode, we're gonna give it a final rating and compare it to other concealable handguns. So jumping right into it, let's talk about some specs about this build. One of the biggest things with concealed carry is size. This is 8.5 inches by 7.5 inches, so it's definitely on the smaller side. The previous build on the 320 was significantly larger than this, so this size felt very comfortable for me. So with two fully loaded shield mags at 15 rounds apiece, comes to 30. We are looking at 3 pounds and 12 ounces. This is over a pound lighter than the SIG build we did before. And with this setup carrying 30 rounds, a whole entire pound of weight reduction is huge. I don't think I can emphasize enough just how different this gun carried compared to the 320. This felt almost non-existent. The whole entire setup felt great. It's probably one of the best carrying setups that I have actually carried. With me carrying this a full 7 days, I carried it out in the heat, playing with my kids, driving cars, sitting in my office 8 hours a day. And honestly, I just forgot this setup was here. So now let's go over the components that actually made this carry setup comfortable. Up first is the Tier 1 Concealed Access Elite. This holster is phenomenal, but before we get into that, Tier 1 sent this to us for this video. They do not get to see the video early. They did not tell us to say anything specific. So just know we are doing our best to be as unbiased as possible. I've carried Tier 1 for a very long time. I've also carried many other brands, and they're definitely one of the better ones, and that's why we wanted to use them for this video. What makes this holster so comfortable, especially for the 43X, is the ability to bend. There's a lot of very rigid appendix setups out there, and it just makes it incredibly uncomfortable. One of the big notes is the adjustability in the clip heights. This was important and actually necessary for this build. You guys will see later with the Arrowhead joggers, it just rode so low. I almost had a hard time grabbing the gun from waistband. With this being maxed out all the way, it was still pretty low. Honestly, I wish I could have went a little higher, but the fact that we could adjust it made the Arrowhead tactical pants a viable option. Definitely wasn't perfect, but if I could not adjust this height as high as I could, there would have been no way I could carry this. This gun would be buried in my pants and almost unusable. So I can definitely appreciate the adjustability on this. Another thing that was really cool is these are the Shield Arms 15 round Glock 43X mags, and they do work in this holster. They are a little loose. It's not a perfect fit, but they have very good retention. No issues with that. It carried beautifully. I did opt for a mag extended depth for this, and it sat a little bit low. So if you're gonna get this holster and you don't plan on running an extension, I would say get the higher version. That way you can get a better grab on the mag. Another huge thing that is super important with appendix carry is the wing. They have this adjustable length wing, so it can push more or less of the gun into your body. Perfect for carrying this. I had no printing issues. Obviously, if I had little printing issues with the 320, it's not gonna be a big deal for the Glock 43X, and it definitely was not. The next thing that made a huge difference on carrying this setup is gonna be the belt. We're using the Core Essentials belt here. This just made it so much easier to carry. It's just so rigid. Like most carry belts, it's super rigid. The perfect size, didn't have any issues with that. One thing to note about a belt setup is it is probably the core of your carry setup. If you look at how a belt conforms to your body, it's gonna feel a little bit awkward because it's so stiff, but it's gonna really keep that gun from folding in or out, pushing away from your body or pushing into your gut. That just gets really uncomfortable, especially with appendix. So this is gonna keep it really rigid. It's gonna stop the gun from bouncing or moving if you have to run. If you sit up and stand a lot, this is gonna keep it planted. Whereas if you run a leather belt, you're just gonna have a lot of issues with rigidity. You can kind of see this just wants to fold in on itself. There's really no support here. And all this does is it makes you feel the gun a lot more, and it's gonna make it print a lot more. If I had to carry this leather belt, you're gonna see the gun folding out and protruding through my t-shirt. If you're carrying with a leather belt, the first thing you can do to increase your overall experience with concealed carry is to throw this away and get a good carry belt. It sucks you have to spend more money for a carry setup, but honestly, what makes the biggest difference with carrying is gonna be your belt. You can have a pretty crappy holster and have this belt and still have a much better experience than a top tier holster and a leather belt. Now, with all that being said, you don't have to get a Core belt. We do sell these on the site, so if you want to get this, check it out. You don't have to get a Core, but definitely get a carry belt over a regular leather belt. What made Core special is the ratcheting system. Made it so easy to pull the belt on and off. It was very convenient. And like I mentioned in the other video, it's very hot in Ohio. And right now I'm drinking a lot of water. Gotta go to the bathroom quite a lot. So having that quick ratchet system just made it so convenient. We also carried the 43X setup with the Arrowhead joggers and shorts. They were very similar to last time. However, a couple things different on comfort. The shorts didn't change. They were still bunching up. One thing I did notice was the belt, I did not tighten it to adjust for the thickness difference between the 43X and the 320. And I definitely had a lot more play, and the gun wanted to sag down a little bit more. So right at the end, I did adjust the tightness of the belt, and it made a huge difference. So if you're gonna be carrying with the joggers and you're changing out different setups, different guns, different holsters, definitely make sure the tightness of the belt is perfect. Even if it's a little bit off, it's gonna make a huge difference on where that gun sits on your body, and it's gonna just conform to your body completely different than jeans will. So definitely keep that in mind. I cannot stress that enough. The joggers performed the exact same. No issues there. They were very comfortable other than the belt digging in my lower back. We're gonna be getting a different belt from Arrowhead to try to solve this issue and actually play with what belt we prefer. Just know that it is very comfortable with working out. This is a very small setup. You're gonna have no issues if you had to go to the gym with this. So with the Glock 43X, I did not notice it a lot with working out if it was obviously gun up. One thing I did notice when I was doing the dumbbell rows, there was a little bit of a pinching on the spare mag holder when I was bent over. Which kind of makes sense. The more you bend at the waist, the more you're gonna notice it. I do have the clips shifting the gun all the way up, so it's at its best comfort level for this. In the previous video, the 320 wasn't super noticeable, and I think it's because I also had it slightly raised. This gun felt very similar to the 320 until I got more crunched. So with any exercise where your legs are perpendicular to your body is when you're really gonna start noticing it. Surprisingly with the squats, when I came down with the squat, I didn't notice it as much, and I think it's because my hips kind of push backwards. So just keep in mind, anything where you're bending, you're gonna notice it. With the Peloton, it's still definitely a no-go. It's fine when you're sitting up like this, but as soon as you start getting into this crunched position, it's not gonna feel good. This is probably not the perfect setup. In theory, I probably wouldn't do an extra mag holder if I was going to the gym, but honestly, I really didn't even notice it. So if you're considering going to the gym and you want extra capacity, you really can't get much more comfortable than the Arrowhead jogger shorts and a little 43X setup. So as you guys know, I like to wear the Core Essentials belt with jeans, and that is my go-to carry setup. One thing that I noted in the previous video is the joggers made it a lot easier to sit for an 8-hour day. But for me, honestly, during the 7-day period where I was carrying, most of that was jeans with the Core Essentials belt. And honestly, I didn't feel uncomfortable sitting at my desk for 8 hours. It was incredibly comfortable to sit. I didn't feel any digging. I didn't have to hike my pants up as high as I did with the 320. There was not a big difference between the core jean setup and the jogger setup. Rating the comfort of this setup, I'm gonna give it an 8.7 out of 10. This was incredibly comfortable, probably more comfortable than most setups I've used in the past. However, there are a couple things that probably could have made it a little more comfortable. This is a Glock 48 holster, so if you reduce some length, we do have a compensator on this setup. It could have probably helped a little bit, but honestly, I didn't notice that when I was sitting down, so take that for what you will. We're also running a spare mag. You could reduce that to reduce some size. Again, I really didn't notice it that much. The thing I noticed the most is the ride height. If I could have got one more click out of this and had it ride a little bit higher in the joggers, probably would have had a little bit more comfort, and it probably would have been over a 9. But just know this is gonna be different for every body style. I'm just one person, one body style. Somebody could experience this completely different than I did. I truly believe this is one of the most comfortable carry setups you can get, so that's why I ranked it so high. With comfort out of the way, let's talk about how effective I was with this build. I'd say it's definitely lower on the list of effectiveness for me. With this being a smaller gun, a smaller grip, it's just a snappier pistol. It doesn't weigh very much. The frame is not super ergonomic. The compensator is reducing a lot of recoil, but it's just a snappy little gun. And you see this with a lot of handguns, including the 365 or really any subcompact carry gun. With how snappy the 43 is, I was more than comfortable adding an inch of length to reduce a lot of that felt recoil. Not only does our compensator reduce the muzzle flip of the handgun, but it's gonna reduce that in the hand feel of recoil. And this is incredibly important if you wanna be competitive with a full-size gun. A lot of my carry setups, I don't see a huge difference in split times or drill times, but going from a 320 that shoots ultra flat to a 43X that's comped, you're gonna notice it. A lot of people think that 9mm shoots the same out of every gun, and that's just simply not the case. You can't take a cartridge and expect it to perform the same across different weights, different guns, different barrel lengths. All of that is taken into consideration with recoil. And that's why I think it was worth sacrificing a little bit of length and weight for this. It helped a lot. And frankly, with how small the 43X is, it lends itself to be comped. Adding a little bit of length on the end just puts it closer to a Glock 19 or 17 length, which I'm used to carrying anyway. So I showed you guys the compensator on here, but to quickly go over everything else on this build, we're running a True Precision threaded barrel. We have the Holosun 407K optic on there, and the Streamlight TLR 7 sub. Reducing recoil increasing accuracy and being able to see at night is incredibly important. I think we all can agree if you can make something slightly better or give you an advantage, you should probably take it, especially if there's not too many sacrifices involved. Sure, everything costs a little bit of money, but if you can get more accurate at distance with adding a dot over irons, personally, I think it's really worth it to add a dot to your carry gun. Not only is it gonna make you accurate up close and really tighten up your groups, but at distance, you're only gonna get that much better. Another thing we threw on here you really can't see is the shield arms 15 round magazine. This is a must. Frankly, I don't know why Glock hasn't came out with their own version of this yet. The fact that you can squeeze 15 rounds in this little setup is just awesome. Shield nailed it with this mag setup. And then frankly, I think it's one of the more important upgrades to this gun. I would not carry this gun if it was a 10 round handgun. There's just too many other great options out there. So for me to make the 43X worth it, I had to run the shield arms mag. And frankly, I think everybody else should too. To gain 50% more capacity in the same exact platform, I think it's just great. Just a little side note, we do not have the metal mag catch from Shield Arms. Do as I say, not do as I do, if you will. We're doing this for testing purposes, so keep that in mind. When you buy this mag, you will need a new mag release. So as you guys can see, we kept this gun relatively stock. Obviously, a new barrel and compensator on there, but other than that, everything is pretty much bolted on. If I could add anything to this build, it would probably be weight, a mag well, and maybe a thumb rest. As you guys can see, I had a couple fumbles with the reload. This is a relatively small mag well that really doesn't help you out very much. And if I was a consumer looking at buying a 43X and you wanted to copy what we did here, magwell is gonna help a lot with reloads. And if you're in an instance when you need to do a reload and it's important, I really wish I would have had a magwell on this. I think it would help that much more. And with weight, this is just a really light gun, which is perfect for carry, but I think I could increase my effectiveness substantially if I could add some weight to this and really reduce more recoil. With the thumb rest, obviously, you can fight some of that recoil pushing down on the slide. When going from jeans and a core belt setup to the Arrowhead Tactical, when I drew, I had a lot of consistency issues on hand placement because the way I had to grab the gun was different. With it riding lower in the joggers, it was just a little bit awkward. That consistency kind of went out the window. No, that's probably not gonna be the case for everybody. I'm sure if I only carried the joggers or if I trained more with the joggers, I'd be fine. But what's nice about thumb rest is you just get another point of contact for consistency, and you could draw from really anything and be super consistent. For me, it was placing my thumb on the takedown lever. I could feel that bite into my thumb, and it helped a little bit, but it wasn't perfect. These are just a few things that I would add to this build to make me that much more effective. So to give this a rating, I'm gonna give it a 5.5 out of 10 on effectiveness. This thing is still just a little snappy with a compensator. Definitely helps. Doesn't shoot as flat as some of my other carry guns. Another thing that's gonna take some of the points away is the mags. While I think it's great there's options out there, it is kind of annoying that you have to buy separate mags to get this gun to be where it is. It's cool that it's an option, but it is kind of annoying. And just adding another variable is going to increase your chances for issues. We haven't seen any of those issues, but just note that is a possible thing that could happen. I think 5.5 is a very fair assessment of this setup. If I wanted to get this higher than a 5.5, I'd probably add a mag well and potentially a gas pedal. And they're not part of the core function of the gun, so it's not going to really affect reliability. One of the big things with a carry setup is concealability. Obviously, you don't want people seeing that you have a gun on you. So how well did the Compt 43X conceal? I honestly don't know if there's a gun that conceal as good as the 43X. The gun is incredibly thin, and combined with a good holster setup and a good belt setup, you can't even see that it's there. As you guys can see in the video, I have to pull my shirt pretty tight before you start seeing printing. And as I said in the previous video, I wear a tighter fitting shirt. So if I were to wear a looser fitting t-shirt or a hoodie, even somebody that is in the industry or that works at Herrington Arms would have absolutely no idea I'm carrying this setup. And I think there's a lot of things that play into it. One of them being the thickness of the gun and the fact that there is a relatively small grip on here. I think the 43X did it right. There's just enough that my hand isn't hanging off the end of the gun. One thing I hate about subcompact guns is you have to have a pinky mag extension to get a full grip. I've never carried those guns because I just think it's incredibly uncomfortable to shoot. And when you go to do a reload, your hand's in the way. I've just never been a fan of that setup. I think the 43X is perfect. And one of the big things with concealability is people seeing this part of your gun peeking through your t-shirt. This is about as short as I could go without my pinky falling off the end of the gun. So with the 43X being a perfect length, I think that definitely aided in concealability. Another thing is gonna be these wedges on the holster, pushing the gun into your body. The proper belt will also help. If you're running a leather belt, it's gonna wanna flop forward. And you're not gonna have as good concealability. So all of this comes down to kind of kit, if you will. Buying the right things is really gonna help with concealability. If you are having a hard time concealing this 43X setup, the joggers actually did a good job of hiding some of the gun. Now, it wasn't a good thing. We needed to draw your gun. There wasn't much height here, but the joggers came up so high that it kind of pushed the gun in with the waistband of the jogger. It just aided in concealability. And if you're having a hard time carrying this with jeans, if you're a relatively small frame person or you're really skinny, most guns are gonna be harder for you to conceal carry. So maybe take a look at the joggers. That ride height may assist in concealing some of this. Frankly, I don't know if too many people would have an issue carrying the 43X. With how small it is, it just kind of gets lost in your waistband. And I think that's why appendix carry got so popular. You can hide a full-size gun really easy. Appendix, the bigger you are, the better it's gonna be for hiding. When you look at strong side carry, a lot of companies chopped the frame to make it not print as bad. But if you took the 43X and carried strong side, there's a pretty good chance you would see this poking through your t-shirt. It's just not an ideal carry setup for concealability. And with me being the size I am, this just disappeared. And that's the reason I'm gonna be giving this a 8.9 out of 10. This would probably get a 9, but there are smaller guns you can buy. There's smaller pocket guns, potentially even a 43 that would reduce some of this size. If you're only worried about printing, this gun has a little bit larger of a frame. To me, it's not noticeable. If you compare it to a 43 or a Glock 26 or an original 365, those frames are just smaller and they're gonna make it that much easier to carry. Adding up all those scores to give us a final score of 23.1 out of 30, I think this gun is a great carry setup. But there's a couple things that knocked it down for me. Having to buy an aftermarket mag that could increase the chances of reliability issues is kind of a bummer. And if you don't feel comfortable doing this, only 10 rounds per mag is just not enough for me. I wouldn't even consider this an option. This also isn't the smallest gun on the market. Being a 43X length, you can get some printing depending on how small you are. And finally, the ride height was just not high enough in the joggers. Well, I think that could be fixed with a slightly tighter belt setup. That was my experience, so I had to throw it in here. For me, this is the ideal carry setup. I like it a lot. I am a little interested to see how it compares to a 365. Maybe we'll do that in a future one, but let me know which guns you guys want to see us do a video on. Like I said, this is a series, so if you haven't seen our 320 video, go check that out. Otherwise, like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.